our student debt is now more than $1 trillion, and there's a lot of speculation as to what has caused such a hike in tuition costs. Excessive salaries for administrative positions, funding fancy new sports centers, or even increase in enrollment. And the truth is, there are a variety of factors that have caused a steady rise since the days our parents went to school. But there is an even more recent factor that directly correlates to this drastic upsurge: the Great Recession. Most of us remember what happened back in 2008. It had something to do with short-sighted decisions regarding interest rates and lending, and ultimately, Americans had to foot the bill. Because so many Americans were newly unemployed after the recession, states were bringing in less income and sales tax revenue, two major sources of funding for education. And as a result, states had to make decisions about where to put their now limited revenue. Unfortunately for us, these decisions played out to be major budget cuts, with funding for higher education being one that was hit pretty hard. We bring up the Great Recession and interest rates to make an important comparison that is gravely affecting the student loan issue. Let's take a look at what interest rates are for students versus big companies. Now, let's put these numbers into a much more comprehensible, tangible example. The average student loan debt is $30,000. So let's say we have a $30,000 loan to be paid off in 20 years. How much extra would a student have to pay in total accrued interest versus a major corporation? However, these totals for student loans are actually incorrect. They're technically even higher. Here's why. A standard loan with a typical repayment plan like the one our calculator measured assumes that we start making payments the next day. But student loans work differently. Payments are usually deferred while in school, yet the interest still accrues, ultimately inflating the loan balance. So when it comes time to make payments for federal loans, they are about 17.2% higher than the original borrowed amount. For pursuing an education, you will pay more than double or even more than triple than a company would. This could have gone into getting a house or starting a new business, two major pillars that not only sustain our middle class, but make it thrive. And practically an entire generation won't be able to afford those because they got an education. There is something seriously wrong here. So how did we get to this point? Student loan interest rates have typically been higher than those for major companies. But why? Why did companies like Sallie Mae, which started out as a public program, privatize? To privatize has one major goal in mind: to make a profit. Is Sallie Mae, who owns 20% of that $1 trillion, profiting off our debt? It's worth noting that from 2008 to 2012, $16 million of Sallie Mae's budget was spent on lobbying against student loan reform. Lastly, let's discuss the shift in public opinion. Starting in the 1980s, education went from being a public good to a private commodity. You went to college so you could get rich. But in thinking this, we've lost sight of the fact that the benefits of education expand way beyond the individual who has the degree. These students become entrepreneurs who start local businesses, who hire local and invest in their local communities. The benefits are tenfold. Not to mention what access to education does for our nation as a whole. We innovate, we explore, we build, we teach, we find cures, we lead. After World War II, there was a major incentive to have all young Americans earn a high school diploma. Just a few decades later, that was achieved, making us the most educated country in the world. And what can we attribute to those golden years? The booming middle class, advancements in technology, and expansion in industry. This is no coincidence. The New York Times noted that in the 1970s, we were top dogs globally in getting a college degree. Today, we are 14th. Free education is surrounded by a stigma because nothing is ever free. And it's true, we as a nation would have to pay. But we ask you, even if you don't think education should be free, why are students being penalized with higher interest rates than those of corporate America? And if we could make just one more point, you are actually already paying for the lack of education through welfare and criminal justice, to name a few, and with Wall Street's mess-ups back in 2008, you had to pay even more. So what would you rather pay for? A prospering nation that gets us back on top, or a crippling one with increase in welfare and crime and corruption? Who is the better investment? We won't pretend to know the answers on how to fix this, but we do hope that through this platform, we can start the discussion, brainstorm, and finally find the solutions. It's time our nation invests in our youth. Unaffordable education is crippling our entire society, and we've really only seen just the tip of the iceberg. To our fellow young Americans, college-bound or not, this affects you, and your future is the better investment.